Everyone in the small town knew her as Grandma Eleanor, but very few people knew her real story. She lived in a narrow white house at the end of Willow Street, where the pavement cracked and the streetlights flickered like tired eyes. Her house was old, with peeling paint and a porch that creaked, but inside, there was always warmth. The kind you couldn't buy, the kind that comes from a life full of love, loss, and unspoken strength. Every morning, Eleanor woke up before sunrise. Not because she had somewhere to go, but because her body had learned long ago that rest was a luxury. She'd sit on the edge of her bed, rubbing her knees, and whisper a quiet prayer, "Thank you for another day." She'd say it even when the pain in her bones felt unbearable, especially then. She had been a grandmother for nearly 20 years, but she had been a mother much longer. And before that, a daughter who learned early that life doesn't wait for you to be ready. Eleanor grew up during hard times. Her parents were kind but poor, and she learned how to stretch meals, mend clothes, and hide her hunger behind a smile. At 16, she fell in love with a boy who promised her the world. At 18, she married him. By 22, she was holding her first child while standing alone in a hospital hallway, learning that promises don't always survive reality. Her husband worked long hours, then longer nights. The distance between them grew until, one day, he was just gone. No dramatic goodbye, no explanation. Just a quiet absence that echoed through the house for years. Eleanor cried for months, but life didn't stop asking things of her. She had children to feed, bills to pay, and a heart that had to keep beating even when it felt broken. She took whatever work she could find, cleaning houses, sewing clothes, washing dishes in diners where her hands smelled like soap and regret. Her children grew up watching her strength. They never heard her complain, they just saw her fall asleep at the dinner table sometimes, her head resting on folded arms, exhaustion written across her face. Without words, they learned what resilience looked like. Years passed, the children left home. Eleanor aged quietly, carrying memories like invisible luggage. Then came the day her daughter called, voice shaking, asking for help. Her daughter's life had collapsed, a broken marriage, a broken home, and two small children who needed stability. Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Bring them home," she said. And just like that, she became a grandmother in the truest sense, raising her grandchildren while her own hair turned silver. The house filled with noise and life again, toys on the floor, crayon drawings on the fridge, and laughter that made the old walls feel young. Eleanor cooked simple meals and told bedtime stories from memory because imagination was endless. At night, after the children slept, she'd sit by the window looking out at the quiet street. Sometimes she cried softly, not just from sadness, but from the immense weight of responsibility. She was older now and tired, but quitting was never an option. One winter evening, her grandson asked, "Grandma, are you tired?" She smiled, brushing his hair back. "Yes, sweetheart. But tired doesn't mean done." That sentence became the quiet rule she lived by. Years later, when the grandchildren grew up and moved on, Eleanor returned to silence. The house felt too big. Her days became slower, her body weaker. But her spirit? Still unbroken. She started sitting on her porch every afternoon, watching the world go by. Neighbors waved. Some stopped to talk. Others hurried on, unaware that the woman they passed held a lifetime of wisdom behind her tired eyes. One day, a young woman sat beside her on the porch steps, crying. Eleanor didn't ask questions, she just listened. When the girl finally spoke, pouring out her fears of failure, Eleanor held her hand and said, "You don't have to be strong forever. Just strong enough for today." Word spread. People started coming to her, not for advice, but for comfort. She never preached, she simply shared her truth, one story at a time. What no one realized was that Eleanor herself was struggling more than ever. Her savings were almost gone. Medical bills were piling up. Some nights, she went to bed hungry so she wouldn't worry anyone. But still, she showed up for others because that's what she had always done. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. It landed with a soft thud that seemed to break the silence of the old house. Eleanor picked it up, her hands trembling just a bit. When she saw the unfamiliar return address, she sat at her kitchen table, just staring at it. It felt like opening it would unleash something she wasn't ready to face. But she did. Inside was a notice from the city. Taxes, late fees, a stern deadline. Eleanor let out a long, slow sigh and folded it back into the envelope. She knew this was coming. Her small pension was stretched so thin it barely covered groceries and her medication. There was absolutely no room for surprises and definitely no room for mistakes like this. That night, she prayed longer than usual. Not for some grand miracle to swoop in and save her, but just for strength. "I've made it this far," she whispered into the darkness. "Just help me make it one more day." The next afternoon, a knock echoed through the house. When Eleanor opened the door, she found a teenage boy standing nervously on her porch, clutching a notebook to his chest like a shield. "My teacher said I should talk to you," he mumbled. "She said you listen." Eleanor offered a gentle smile and stepped aside. "Come in, dear." He sat in her worn armchair and spoke about feeling invisible, about wanting to drop out of school, about the heavy thought that his life just didn't matter. Eleanor listened, really listened, just like she always did for everyone. When he was done, she didn't offer easy answers. Instead, she told him about the nights she cried alone, about feeling forgotten herself, and about how staying, just continuing on, mattered more than anything, especially when it feels like no one is watching. The boy left with tears in his eyes, but for the first time in a long time, there was a spark of hope in his step. That evening, as Eleanor sat alone again, the silence felt heavier than before. She found herself wondering who would listen to her if she finally admitted she was afraid. Days turned into a week, and then her granddaughter visited, completely unannounced. She saw it all immediately: the stack of unopened letters on the table, the near-empty fridge, the tired slump in her grandmother's shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Grandma," she said, her voice soft and full of concern. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor couldn't meet her eyes. "You have your own life, your own worries." Her granddaughter knelt right there on the floor in front of her, taking her frail hands. "You carried all of us for so long. Let us carry you now." For the first time in years, Eleanor allowed herself to cry freely. Not quiet, hidden tears, but a raw, honest sob, held tightly in her granddaughter's arms. Together, they found help. They discovered community programs Eleanor never knew existed. Neighbors, hearing the truth for the first time, stepped forward without a second thought. One woman organized a small fundraiser online, another started bringing groceries every week, refusing to take no for an answer, and that boy, the one Eleanor had listened to, came by regularly, offering to fix leaky faucets and mow the lawn. Eleanor was overwhelmed not by charity but by an outpouring of pure, simple love. One evening, as a beautiful sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eleanor sat on her porch with a book. Children's laughter filled the street, and neighbors waved as they walked by. Life felt lighter, fuller. A local reporter even came by, curious about the woman everyone in the neighborhood called the listening grandma. Eleanor just laughed softly. "I'm just someone who stayed," she said. The story ran in the local paper. A small article in the back pages, but it was enough. Letters started to arrive. This time filled not with demands, but with gratitude. People from her past, people she'd long forgotten, wrote to share how her quiet words had saved them during their own dark times. She read every single one, her own tears falling onto the pages. She realized then that her life, with all its hidden pain and quiet sacrifice, had a meaning that reached far beyond what she could ever have imagined. And even though her body was slowing down, her purpose, the simple act of listening and staying, had never been stronger. As the seasons changed, Eleanor's steps grew slower, her once brisk pace giving way to a more measured shuffle. But even as her own energy waned, the life on her porch never did. It remained a bustling hub, a sanctuary for the neighborhood. People from all walks of life still came. Some arrived with heavy hearts, their stories spilling out like overflowing cups, seeking the quiet wisdom she offered. Others came just to sit, to share the silence, finding comfort in her steadfast presence. Eleanor welcomed them all, her door and her heart always open. The porch was more than just wood and paint. It was a testament to her belief in connection. One crisp autumn afternoon, a profound tiredness settled over her, deeper than any she had felt before. She eased back into her worn rocking chair, the one that had held so many stories, and watched the golden leaves drift down from the trees. They danced in the breeze, a final, beautiful surrender. A strange sense of peace washed over her, a feeling of completeness. Her granddaughter sat beside her, her small hand enveloping Eleanor's wrinkled one, a warm anchor in the cooling air. The world seemed to slow down, narrowing to just the two of them on that porch. With a voice barely above a whisper, Eleanor asked a question that had been resting in her heart. "Did I do okay?" Her granddaughter's eyes welled with tears, but a radiant smile broke through. "You did more than okay, Grandma," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You changed lives." A single tear traced a path down Eleanor's cheek, but it was a tear of gratitude. Hearing those words, she knew her life had found its purpose. She closed her eyes, letting the familiar sounds of her beloved street wash over her. The joyful peal of children's laughter, the rhythmic tap of footsteps on the pavement, the distant hum of a car. It was the symphony of life, continuing on, and she was a part of it. When Eleanor passed away, it wasn't a quiet affair. The whole town gathered, not in a somber, formal way, but like a sprawling family reunion. They congregated on her lawn, on the sidewalk, and of course, on her porch. Stories were shared, weaving a rich tapestry of her impact. Laughter mixed with tears as people recounted her simple acts of kindness, the advice she'd given, the comfort she'd provided just by listening. Her porch, the epicenter of her quiet revolution, became a memorial, and one day, someone placed a small, hand-painted sign on the railing. It read, "Sit, listen, stay." Those 3 words captured her entire philosophy. Her house didn't remain empty for long. It transformed, evolving into a community space, a continuation of her legacy. People still came to the porch to talk, to connect, to find a moment of peace, just as they had when she was there. Her favorite book, its spine soft and pages worn, remained on the little table by her chair. Her rocker still sat by the window as if waiting for her to return. Eleanor's life was not one you'd read about in history books. She wasn't famous or wealthy, and her journey hadn't always been easy. But her life was profoundly powerful. It was a testament to a simple, beautiful truth that true kindness doesn't need a grand stage or official permission. It showed that real strength can be quiet, found not in loud declarations but in consistent, gentle presence. And it proved, beyond any doubt, that even one grandmother sitting on a simple front porch can change the world one conversation, one connection, one heart at a time. Her legacy wasn't built of stone or steel, but of the love she so freely gave, which continues to ripple through the community she cherished. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more tales of quiet strength and everyday inspiration.